Hello everyone. In this lecture, we will see the exception handling part 2. In previous video, we have already learned the exception handling part 1. So exception handling is nothing but to handle runtime errors so that the regular flow of the application can be preserved in a Java. So in the second part, we will see what is the concept of through and through keywords, then what is a custom exception, exception propagation, and default exception. So first we will see the concept of through and throughs keyword. So through is one of the keyword in Java which is used to transfer the exception to someone else. Sometimes we can create exception object explicitly and can hand over to the JVM manually by using through keyword. So syntax of through is nothing but through new arithmetic exception. So basically through is used to explicitly through an exception from method or any block of code. Through can either send the checked or unchecked exception. So basically through is used inside the method to throw an exception. And one more thing related to through concept, at a time we can throw only a one exception at a time. So we will see the example of through keyword. So here I am creating one a class, public class test through. In that I am defining one method. The name of that method is nothing but checknum. I am creating that method as a static because using a static we can call anywhere that main method throughout the program. So in that program I want to calculate the square of num, but suppose if number is negative, then I want to just throw the exception, that is number is negative and we cannot calculate the square. So regarding that, first here I am creating one method. The name of that method is nothing but checknum, and for that method I am passing one parameter, that is integer num, which is taken from the user. So in that method I am use the if else condition. In if, here I am checking, means here we are checking the number is less than or greater than 1. If number is less than 1 means number is negative, then here we need to throw a arithmetic exception, through new arithmetic exception, that is number is negative, we cannot calculate the square. Else if condition of the if is false means number is greater than 1, then we need to calculate the square of num, that is num into num. Okay, so after that I am defining here main method, public static void main string args. In main method, creating the object of class test through is equal to new test through. Using the object here, calling the method check num, and directly I am passing the value of the parameter integer num. Okay, so rather than taken from the console, I am just passing the parameter of the value, that is number, it -3, and just give the sysout statement, that is system.out.println and rest of the code. So when we call that method check num inside the main, the control is jump to this method where I'm defining a method public static void main check num, so that num parameter can got the value, that is -3, whatever I'm provided here. It is entered inside the method. Then when it will check inside the if statement, num is less than 1 means num is -3, less than 1, condition is true, then it will not calculate the square of that num. It will just keep the else part and it will just throw an exception, that is arithmetic exception, number is negative, cannot calculate the square, and just control pass out to that statement where we are invoking that method checknum and just exit the program. So it will not print the rest of the code and it will just give the output as a number is negative, cannot calculate the square. So this is the concept behind through keyword. Then one more keyword is used for throwing the exception, that is called as a throws keyword. Throws keyword is used to declare the exception with method. We can use throws keyword to delegate the responsibility of exception handling to the caller method. Then caller method is responsible to handle that exception. So basically syntax or the small example related to throws is nothing but void m1 throws the arithmetic exception, that is m2 method. So basically the concept behind throws is nothing but what? It is used to explicitly sorry it is used to explicitly throw the signature of method to indicate that this method might throw one of the listed type of the exception, and here the caller of this called method has handled the exception using try catch block. Means what? In throws, using throws we can throw the multiple exception at the time in the definition of the method, but who is the caller of that method is basically responsible to handle that exception. So let us see the example related to throws keyword. So this is one of the example of throws keyword. Here also first I am creating one a class, public class test throws. Inside that defining one method public static int divide num, then passing two parameters integer m and n, and use the throws keyword. Here I want to throws an arithmetic exception. So here we can throw more than one exception also. But currently in this example I want to throw an arithmetic exception. Just that's why I'm just mentioning here arithmetic exception. So inside the method I'm just writing the expression integer division, one more variable is taken. In that I'm just divide the numbers, those are passing as a parameter, that is nothing but m and n. So m divided by n, and I want to just return the value of the answer or expression. So after that here I'm creating a main method public static void main string args. First creating the object test through class obj. So in the caller method, I need to handle that exception because divide num is one of the called method, and that method is basically throw an exception. So in throws keyword, the caller method is only having a responsibility to handle the exceptions by using try catch block whenever it will call that methods where exception is present. So here main is a calling method, means main is called as a caller method, or we can say calling method, and divide num is called as a called method. So main is calling to divide num. So main is responsible to handle the exception inside the main only. Okay, so here I am applying the try catch block. So inside the try, just writing the system.out.println obj.divide num. So inside the sysout I am just invoking the divide num method and just giving the two parameter value because this function is required. Sorry, this method is required two parameters m and n. So passing the value for m and n is 45 comma 0. Okay, so if the exception is present, so we need to handle that exception inside the catch, because try is caught that exception and catch block can handle that exception. So basically it will throw the arithmetic exception. So that's why we are creating here instance of arithmetic exception and write down the system.out.println number cannot be divided by 0. And after that here I'm just mentioning system.out.println rest of the code. So output of the this program will be shown is that the number cannot be divided by 0 because the value of m is 45 and n is 0. So 45 divided by 0 is nothing but it is not divisible by 0. So that's why try can caught that exception whatever thrown by divide by num, and it will give to the catch. So catch can handle that arithmetic exception and it will print the output number cannot be divided by 0, and it will print rest of the code. So rather than 45 and 0, suppose I'm rather than 0 I'm mention here 5 value, then 45 divided by 5, so answer is not a 0, so it will be give the answer of that divisible number 9. But here rather than 5 mentioning here 0, so that's why 45 is not divisible by 0, that's why it will print number cannot be divided by 0, and it will print again the next line of the code, that is rest of the code. So that is the concept behind throws. Now we will move the next concept, that is the difference between throw and throws. So what is the primary difference between throw and throws? The throw keyword is basically used to throw an exception explicitly, but throws keyword is used to declare an exception along with the method definition. So throw keyword is basically used to inside the method. So let us see. Suppose I want to throw any exception, then I need to use the throw keyword inside the method. So here I am given the name of the method is m, and inside that method I am just throwing the exception. But regarding the throws keyword is basically used to declare along with the method definition. So see here the example. Along with the method definition, I am just using the throws keyword and specify the name of the exception. Then third primary difference, throw is always followed by the instance of the exception class. Means throw can create the instance of that exception class, but throws is always followed by the name of the exception class only. It cannot create the instance of the class. And last difference, we can throw only one exception at a time, but using throws keyword we can throw multiple exceptions at a time. So that is a primary difference between throw and throws. So we will move the next concept, that is a custom exception. So custom exception is nothing but our own exception. So most of the time in our program or in our project, we need to create our own exception. That own exception is called as a custom exceptions. So we can create our own exception, that is known as custom exception, or we can also say that user defined exception. So for creating the user defined exception, we need to follow some steps for creating the user defined exception. User defined exception means what? We can create the new class by using the existing class of the exception, but in that new class we can create our own method. That method will be handle our own exceptions by using our called method and calling method. That concept is called as a custom exception. So we need to follow some steps for creating a user defined exception or our own exception. So what are those steps? First, we need to create the new class, that is also called as a child class or derived class. Then second step, the user defined exception class must be extended from either java.lang.exception class or either java.lang.runtime exception class. So our class must be extended from either exception class or runtime exception class. So we can create here our class is a derived class, and we can refer the base class as either exception class, or either we can consider the base class as a runtime exception class. So those are the first two steps. Then third step, while creating the custom exception, prefer to create an unchecked exception or runtime exception rather than the checked exception. So basically in exception handling there are two types of the exception, checked and unchecked exception, but at the time of creating user defined exception we need to prefer the unchecked exception. Those are also called as a runtime exception. And the fourth and important step, that is every user must be define exception class in which create the parameterized constructor, and it must be called the parameterized constructor of either exception class or runtime exception class by using the super keyword, and we need to pass the string parameter always for that parameterized constructor. Means what? In our own user defined constructor, sorry, user defined exception class, we need to create one parameterized constructor, and that parameterized constructor we need to must be called either our base class if we define as an exception, or if we are referring it a runtime exception, then it will call the runtime exception, and we need to pass one string message through the super keyword for that. So let us see the example of custom exception. So first I am creating a new class, that is new derived class, by using base class as a runtime exception. So public class insufficient fund exception means, suppose I am having an account in a bank and I want to check the balance. Okay, so suppose I want to perform a transaction to withdraw a money, but the proper balance is not available in my bank account. So it should be need to display your balance is insufficient, or you are not having the sufficient balance in your account. So it will need to show in our monitor that is called as a exception, because the balance is not proper available whatever amount I need to withdraw in my account. So for that example I am creating here custom exception or user defined exception. So first step according to that, we need to create a new class, that is public class insufficient fund exception. Then second, we need to derive our class either by using exception class or runtime exception class. So I'm just create my derived class by using the super class as a runtime exception. That is insufficient fund exception is my name of derived class. It will extend from the base class as a runtime exception. So in that class, I need to call one parameterized constructor, and for that parameterized constructor I need to pass the string parameter always. So because of that I'm just creating here one string object, that is private string message, and in that I'm calling the parameterized constructor which is called from the runtime exception class. So public insufficient fund exception string message, and message is passed through the class runtime exception because I'm choosing here the base class as a runtime exception. So next I'm creating one a class public class account. In that class I'm just creating a variable that is a balance and mention the value of that, it is a 3000. Then using get balance I'm just retrieve that balance, whatever balance is available in my account. Then create one more method, that is withdraw method. In that withdraw method integer amount, if amount is greater than balance then I need to throw here new insufficient fund exception, because if amount is greater than balance then I need to show the message in front of the user that is your account is having a insufficient balance. So I'm just throwing here exception insufficient balance in your account, and it will just break out the method. And if amount is less than balance then it will be just minus from the balance and it will again recalculate the balance. So next I'm just creating here main method. In the main method I'm creating the object of account class. In that account class I'm just display first what is the current balance using withdraw. So current balance is what, here I'm just giving the value of current balance is 3000. So it will just display 3000, and current balance, then I'm just when calling the withdraw function, then it will go to the withdraw method. It will check amount is 3500 which will greater than balance. So condition is true, then it will throw the exception insufficient balance in your account. So it will just display the message and break out exit the program. So this is the concept behind custom exception. So next concept is what is the exception propagation. So exception propagation means what? The process of sending exceptions from called method to the calling method is called exception propagation. So exception propagation in what happen? If suppose the exception has occurred any one of the method in our class and every method is just pass that exception to called method to calling method, and no one in that called method to calling method can handle that exception, so it just abnormally terminate the program or exit the program, and it will not showing any proper output of that program. Okay, so let us see the example, two examples based on that. What is a exception propagation? So see here in first example I am creating one class example. There are three methods are available. Void m is the first method which will throws arithmetic exception, because inside that m here just creating one expression integer x 50 divided by 0. So using that expression this method will be create a exception, or that exception is not handled, so that method only just throw the exception, means this is the called method, and called method is just throw the exception to the caller method. So next one more method is there n, which will also throw the arithmetic exception, and in that n it I'm calling here m method. So this method is also not having the try catch block code to handle that exception. Then one more method is there again void p, that is also throw an arithmetic exception, that is n. And finally I'm defining here main method is also throw an arithmetic exception. So in that I'm creating the object of class example and just call the p method and just write down system.out.println normal flow. But this program is not showing any output and it will also not show the normal flow output. It will just keep that because when here calling the p method, so p will be called to n, then n will be in call the m, and m is also not writing here the try catch block because in m method there is exception is occurred, but still no one the method from m and p and main also can use the try catch block to handle that exception. So that's why the program execution can stop the abnormally and it will just terminate the program. So how we can handle the exception propagation? So either any one of the method we need to use the try catch block to handle. So let us see the second example. In second example, I'm just creating the class test. So here also first creating method first void m. It is also throws an arithmetic exception. In that I'm writing here the expression integer x is equal to 50 divided by 0. Then creating one more method void n throws arithmetic exception. In n inside n I'm calling the m method. So here caller is a n and caller is a m method, but till n is cannot use the try catch block to handle the exception which will caught in a m method. Then third is a p method. It is also through an arithmetic exception, but p can responsible to handle that exception. Means in p method here I'm including the try and catch block. So in try, p method can caught the exception whatever occurred in m, and using a catch block it will handle the exception. So arithmetic exception A creating the instance of arithmetic exception because in m method it will create the arithmetic exception. We also throws an arithmetic exception. So in catch I'm creating here instance of arithmetic exception and write down the system.out.println exception is handled and it will print the message number is not divisible by 0. And in main method I'm just creating the object of class, invoke the method p and writing the system.out.println normal flow. So when I'm calling the method p, when control is passed to the p method, in try block it will go to n method, then inside the n again it will go to the m method. So when it will invoke the expression and caught the exception handle in try block, then that exception is handled by using catch block, then it will just print out exception is handled, that is the first line of the output, then divided by 0 is exception, it will print that message get message and it will lastly display normal flow. So that is called as exception propagation. Means any one of the method from caller to calling we need to use the try catch block to handle that exception. If no any single caller to calling method can handle that exception by using try catch block, then program can stop abnormally and it will terminate the execution of the program. So that is the concept behind exception propagation. And the last concept related to exception handling is nothing but default exception handler. So if an exception raised in a method, JVM first checks for exception handling code in that method. If method does not contain any exception handling code, the JVM terminates the method abnormally and removes the entry from the stack. And this process will continue until main method. Means suppose in our program any method is raised the exception, and if we cannot write the try catch block code to handle that exception, then JVM is internally stop the execution of that method and it will remove the entry of that method inside the stack memory, and this process will continue unless and until all the methods have not finished the task up to the caller method. So caller is also main, and if main method is also does not have any code handle for the exception, then JVM also terminate the main and remove the entry from the stack. So that concept is called as a default exception handler, and it is just when it is invoked it will just print the exception information to the console. Means it will show there is error is occurred and it will be not handled by the programmer. That is called as the exception handler. Thank you.